Hello everyone, this is Dr. Kenobi, and in this series of videos, what I'm going to walk you through is how to read a scientific paper. When I say scientific paper, what I mean is a research study, like the ones we've discussed in the previous few weeks, that has been written up, submitted for peer review, revised, and has now been accepted for publication. So this would be an article in a peer-reviewed journal. Depending on the journal, there's some variation in the basic format, but all scientific papers adhere to this basic structure that you see here: a title, authors and author information, an abstract, introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion, and references. Now, depending on the journal, there is some variation you might see. Sometimes the materials and methods come after the discussion at the very end of the paper. That's one variation you might see. Another variation can be that the discussion and results are together in one section combined, but we're going to use one particular paper as an example that adheres to this format that you see here. So we're going to walk through this paper, Reduction of Bacterial Burden by Copper Alloys on High-Touch Athletic Center Surfaces, published in the American Journal of Infection Control. We're not going to read the paper word for word, but I'm going to walk you through the approach you should take to reading this paper and point out what information you can get in each of the sections we just saw. My goal is, by the end of this, you should have a couple of tips and tricks to speed up the amount of time that it takes for you to read a paper, as well as to get more information out of the paper, and combining this week and next week, start to actually critique a paper. So look at the paper and determine whether or not you agree with what the authors conclude. So if I go back to my list of sections to a scientific paper, we're going to cover these first three in this video. We're going to talk about the title, authors and author information, and the abstract. So let's go back to our paper and highlight the title of the paper. The title of the paper should be short and informative. It usually provides for you the major finding of the paper. So this title right here, which we've already read, is saying that the major finding of this paper is that the use of copper in gym equipment, that's what they mean by high-touch athletic center surfaces, so copper gym equipment has less bacteria on it than traditional non-copper equipment. That's the major finding of this paper. The next section you should find in your paper is the authors and the author information. So I just want to highlight several different places where you're going to find information related to the authors. And I'm going to change color here really quickly just so we can keep the different sections distinct from one another. So the very first thing you'll find is the listing of the actual authors and then any sort of degrees they have associated. So this is Shannon M. Hinze-Leisure, PhD, so Dr. Hinze-Leisure, and then these two individuals have their degrees listed here as well. So those are the names of the authors. And then notice we also have down here an institution, so the Department of Biology for Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa. So these people are our neighbors from Iowa. This is telling you where this research actually took place, where these people did their work. And then if I scroll down to the bottom of this same page, highlighted here in blue, we have what's called the correspondence information. So let's say you read this paper and you have additional questions, or you read something about something they have and you'd like to see if you could use a strain of their bacteria for your own research, or you're looking at putting something that they suggest into practice and you have additional questions. This is the corresponding author, the person that you should contact, and how to actually contact that individual. So that's the author information. The next section is the abstract. So let's go back up here. This paragraph right here, immediately after the title, is the abstract. So let's highlight it, and we'll highlight it in a different color than everything else we've used so far. So we'll highlight that in yellow. Now the abstract is essentially a one-paragraph summary of the paper as a whole. And in this case, they've even broken it down and told you where they're summarizing the background, the methods, the results, and the conclusions. That's not always the case for an abstract. In this case, it is. The abstract is typically what you use when you're sorting through a whole bunch of papers, trying to determine whether or not you want to read the paper or not. It's not something you actually use all that much when you're reading the paper itself. So we're not going to talk much more about it. We're going to assume you've already read the abstract of the paper, you know you want to read the paper, and now you're ready to get into it. The one thing I would say is there can be a temptation when you are writing a research paper yourself and you're pulling background information and you need a bunch of peer-reviewed articles to rely solely on the abstract as a substitute for reading the paper. You should never rely on doing that, and we'll talk more about why next week when we talk about evaluating the data the authors have presented. But you want to read the paper itself. Critique the paper, make sure you agree with it. Don't just rely on the abstract telling you what the paper shows. All right, so that gets us through the title, the authors and author information, and the abstract. In the next video, we're going to pick back up and actually get into the meat of the paper with the introduction.